just before my wedding. Everything fell apart because of a single phone call I wasn't even supposed to hear. I'm 26, and until recently, I was engaged to a man the same age. We had been together for 3 years and shared a life, including our 1-year-old twin boys. The pregnancy wasn't planned, and at first, my fiancé was firmly against me keeping the babies. But I was determined. I told him I would go through with it, with or without him. I even made it clear I wouldn't demand child support if he chose to leave. Motherhood felt right to me. I had always had a strong maternal instinct, and I believed I could raise my children alone if I had to. At first, he pushed back hard, and I almost walked away. Only when I threatened to leave for good did he seem to come around. From that moment, he was a supportive partner through the pregnancy, and an attentive father after our sons were born. When the twins arrived, an unexpected twist we hadn't planned for, I realized how difficult it would have been to manage everything on my own. In many ways, I was grateful he chose to stay. 6 months after the boy's birth, he proposed. I said yes without hesitation. It felt like the struggles we had gone through, including his initial resistance, were behind us. Pregnancy had softened me, and I chose to forgive the past. After all, we had 3 years of love and now a family. I believed it was the right time to build a future together. We spent months planning the wedding, and I was genuinely happy. My parents loved him too. He seemed like the perfect partner. But everything unraveled the night before the wedding. Tradition had us spending that night apart. I stayed at our home, while he moved back temporarily with his family just a few blocks away. After dinner, he called to tell me he loved me and couldn't wait to marry me. It was emotional and beautiful. We said our goodbyes, but he never properly hung up the phone. He has a habit of not pressing the screen hard enough, and this time, the call stayed connected without him realizing it. When I heard his father's voice in the background, curiosity got the better of me, and I stayed on the line to listen. When I heard his father speaking to him, I casually asked if he was still talking to me. His voice sounded so distant and drained, I could instantly tell something was wrong. What followed is a conversation that's been stuck on replay in my mind. Even though a week has already passed, his dad asked him if he still felt the same way he had 2 days earlier. He quietly answered yes. Then his mother chimed in, telling him that, no matter what he was feeling, he had no choice but to go through with the wedding. My ex's frustration finally showed. He pushed back, telling them he wouldn't be bullied into doing something against his will. His father responded coldly. They couldn't make him marry someone he didn't love, but they could disinherit him if he didn't. The choice was his. His mother jumped in too, lecturing him about how now that he was a father, he had to step up and be responsible. She said it was bad enough he'd had children out of wedlock. The least he could do was fix it by marrying me instead of dragging it out, because he wasn't ready. His father agreed with her. Then, my ex started venting. He said it wasn't fair, that he was being backed into a corner and pressured into marrying me just to avoid being cut off financially. He complained about how no one ever cared about what he was ready for, not me, not his parents. When I decided to keep the babies, he hadn't been ready to be a father, but he stayed because he was pushed. Now he was being forced into a marriage he still wasn't prepared for. He kept going, angry and bitter, saying he was tired of everyone making decisions for him and dumping huge responsibilities on him he didn't want. At some point, he must have stormed out of the room, leaving his phone behind. I stayed on the line long enough to hear his parents criticizing how irresponsible he was acting, and that's when I finally hung up. I sat there in complete shock. It turned out the only reason he agreed to marry me was because his parents threatened to cut him out of their will. And I was finding this out the night before we were supposed to say our vows. For a few minutes, I couldn't even process it. He had always acted so committed, a great boyfriend, a devoted father. Nothing in his behavior ever hinted that deep down, he didn't want any of it. He had hidden it all so well that I almost believed the dream we were building was real. But now I knew the truth. When I finally pulled myself together, I packed up my boys and left. Luckily, they were already with me. I jumped into my car and drove to a small hotel out of town. It was late. The babies were fussy, but I managed to get them back to sleep. Then, without saying a word to anyone, I blocked my ex and his entire family. I cried all night. Everything I thought I knew about my relationship, our future, had been a lie. At around 4 in the morning, I finally passed out from exhaustion. The wedding, the venue, all of it had been paid for by his wealthy parents. For once, at least, I wasn't stuck worrying about the money. As far as I was concerned, the money they wasted was their problem, not mine. They had pushed for this wedding, now they could deal with the fallout. Before I even went to sleep that night, I texted all my friends and family letting them know the wedding was canceled. I promised I'd explain everything later, but didn't share any details right then. I'd already made it crystal clear that I didn't want anyone contacting my ex or his family, and I trusted my people to respect my wishes without asking questions. On what was supposed to be my wedding day, I stayed at the hotel, trying to numb the pain with food and spending time with my sons. They were the only ones I wanted near me. Even though my heart was shattered, I put on a brave face for them. They needed me to be strong. After taking a day to breathe, I decided it was time to go back to our house, gather my things, and leave for good. First, I dropped the twins off at my parents' place, then returned to the house alone the following day. Just like I expected, my ex was there, looking a complete mess. He seemed panicked, exhausted, and desperate. I still can't tell how much of it was genuine, and how much was just another performance. He rushed to me, asking where I had been and insisting he'd been sick with worrying. Without letting me get a word in, he launched into a rant about how he and his family had waited for hours at the wedding venue, humiliated by my disappearance. He said my behavior was unacceptable and demanded that I offer a public apology because Cold Feet didn't justify embarrassing him like that. I didn't engage. I simply told him I'd overheard his conversation with his parents the night before the wedding. For a second, he looked confused. Then, as realization hit him, I saw shame flicker across his face. Good. I didn't owe him explanations. Without saying anything more, I went inside, packed only the essentials, and left, with him standing alone in the yard. He had made his choices, and now I was making mine. At that point, I wasn't interested in being anyone's wife anymore. I only wanted to be a good mother to my boys. That was nearly a week ago, and since then, we hadn't spoken. I thought that was the final chapter between us. But earlier today, he showed up at my parents' house, begging to talk. By now, my parents and close friends all knew the truth, so naturally, they were wary. Still, I agreed to hear him out one last time. I didn't invite him inside. The babies had just fallen asleep, and the last thing I wanted was a shouting match waking them up. So we talked outside, in the front yard. He apologized for everything, for the lies, for the pressure, for the pain he'd caused. He told me he truly loved me and our sons, but that he simply wasn't ready for marriage yet. Even so, he said he wanted to stay in our lives, to try again, this time without his parents' interference. I listened, but honestly, I didn't know what to believe anymore. After almost a year of pretending, it's hard to just trust him again. I told him I needed time to think about what comes next. He doesn't want to end things between us, not yet, anyway. But as for me, I'm still not sure. I didn't know what to say to him. Of course, I wanted my boys to have a relationship with their father, they deserved that. But trusting him, that was a different story. As for myself, after everything that had happened, I desperately needed a break. I started wondering, what if I decided not to give our relationship another chance at all? Update 1. Hey everyone, I know it's been a while since I posted. Life has been chaotic between work, the kids, and moving out. I just haven't had the time to sit down and give an update. But I want to say thank you. The outpouring of support has been incredible. And I'm so grateful to everyone who sent kind words and advice. Truly, it's meant the world to me. Since then, a lot has happened. First off, I did speak to a lawyer about custody. I've decided I'm filing for full custody of my sons. I also made the decision not to reconcile with my ex. At one point, some people started sending me nasty messages, calling me selfish just for thinking about getting back with him. Honestly, those messages were hurtful and completely unfair. I'm a mother, yes, but I'm also human, and this was a 3-year relationship, not a fling. It had only been a week since everything blew up. Of course, emotions were still raw. I loved him. That love didn't just vanish overnight, and for a while, my heart was torn. But now, after having some time and space, I feel much clearer. No matter what feelings still linger, I know I have to prioritize myself and, most importantly, my kids. That means not getting back with someone I can't trust. The hateful comments were uncalled for, but hey, this is the internet. I probably should have expected it. For the record, I started looking for a lawyer just 2 days after calling off the wedding. It took me some time to find someone I truly trusted, but I did. As for custody, my ex and I had never talked about it before, because we never thought we'd reach this point. But now, I'm taking the steps necessary to protect myself and my boys. I honestly don't believe he would try to take them away from me. But his parents, that's another story. They're very traditional and conservative, and I can easily imagine them fighting to keep their grandchildren close, no matter what it takes. I'm not taking any chances. The last time I spoke to my ex was about 3 days ago. We haven't talked since, which only confirms what I already knew. Whatever promises he made about fixing things were just empty words. If he really cared, he would have at least checked in once. He didn't. So yes, I'm absolutely confident now that ending things is the right choice. There's no trust left between us, and I refuse to stay with someone who doesn't genuinely want to be with me. This is what's best for me and my sons. I'll be telling him my decision soon, and I just hope he handles the custody issue like an adult. That was the last thing I needed added to my plate right now. Update 2. I finally sat down with my ex and told him straight I wasn't getting back with him, and I would be filing for full custody. I figured he might take it well, after all. He had openly admitted not being ready for marriage or fatherhood. You'd think he'd be relieved, right? Nope. Instead, he got upset and started arguing with me, insisting that I couldn't just take his kids away. Now, maybe that would make sense if we were a normal couple, but we weren't. As you all know, this is someone who hadn't even wanted kids in the first place. Even just a week ago, he was still saying he wasn't ready to be a dad. So where was this sudden fight for custody coming from? It didn't take a genius to figure it out. His parents were clearly pulling the strings again. We had this conversation at a restaurant, and honestly, the way he started raising his voice and panicking was mortifying. I kept trying to get him to calm down, not because I cared about his feelings anymore, but because I didn't want to cause a scene. Eventually, he settled down a little, and I tried to reason with him. The truth is, I can't afford a long, drawn-out custody battle. I don't have the money, I definitely don't have the energy, and I know his family could hire the best lawyers without blinking. Even if I had the moral high ground, they could make things messy. So I tried to appeal to his common sense. I told him, "You've been saying you're not ready for kids for over a year. I'm willing to take full responsibility. You'd be free to live your life however you want, without the pressure of marriage or parenthood. Isn't that what you wanted?" I really thought he'd see the logic in that, but he just shook his head and said he'd changed his mind, that he was ready now to be a father. Yeah, right. There was just no way that someone who had been terrified of fatherhood for a whole year suddenly had a complete change of heart in 1 week. It didn't add up. So I asked him point blank, "Is there something you're not telling me?" And that's when the truth finally came out. Just as I suspected, it was about his parents. After the wedding was called off, he'd confessed everything to them, including all the doubts and fears he had admitted during that phone call I overheard. And instead of supporting him, his parents pressured him even harder. They accepted that the marriage wasn't happening anymore because they couldn't control that part, but they absolutely refused to accept losing access to their grandkids. Once again, they threatened to cut him off financially unless he convinced me to agree to a joint custody arrangement. That's why he came crawling back a week later. Not because he suddenly realized he loved me. Not because he finally felt ready to be a father, but because he was terrified of losing their money. He was practically begging me to agree to joint custody by the end of our conversation. But honestly, I was beyond disgusted. I just got up and left. I couldn't believe he was still letting his parents pull the strings. I had given him an easy out. He didn't have to be a father. He didn't have to marry me. He could have walked away freely. But no. All he cared about was holding on to his parents' money. If that was really what mattered most to him, I didn't want him anywhere near my kids. They deserve better. They deserve a father who wants to be there, not someone clinging to them for a financial safety net. At that point, I decided I didn't even want child support. I didn't want anything that would keep him tethered to us. It's been a few days since then, and I've blocked him everywhere again. I don't even want to hear from him anymore. The last message he sent before I blocked him, he actually suggested we move forward with joint custody, and that he would split his inheritance with me once his parents passed away. As if I was interested in his family's dirty money. I honestly can't believe he thought that was a solution. This is what I get, I guess, for falling for a spoiled brat in the first place. I've worked for everything I have. Yes, my parents supported my education. But we weren't wealthy. I earned scholarships. I hustled, and I built a life for myself. Meanwhile, he was the only son of ridiculously rich parents, never having to work hard for anything. I thought he'd changed once he met me. He acted like he had changed. For 3 years, he managed to keep up the illusion. But now, the mask has fallen, and I see him for who he truly is. And honestly, I don't want to stick around to see what else he's capable of. I'm done. I'm fine raising my kids alone. No father is better than a father who doesn't even want to be one. Now, I'm absolutely certain that walking away was the right decision. I just hope he eventually signs away. His parental rights rather, than dragging us all through a messy custody battle. Until then, I'll keep praying for peace. Update 3. Hey everyone, finally back with some good news. I know it's been a while since my last update, but life has been hectic. First off, my babies and I have moved into a smaller apartment. It's nothing fancy, but it's ours. Unlike the old house I shared with my ex, this place is mine, and that feels amazing. We're also much closer to my parents now, which has been a huge blessing. They can pop over easily and help with the kids whenever I need an extra hand. And trust me, sometimes I desperately need it. On top of that, I've managed to hire a full-time nanny to help out. I'm incredibly lucky that I can afford that right now. Because let's be real, I have to keep working. There's no other option. My parents have been incredible, stepping in to help financially wherever they can. They're doing their absolute best, even though none of us saw this coming. I'm so grateful to have such loving and supportive people in my corner. Now on to the part I know you're probably most curious about. My ex. He signed away his parental rights. I honestly don't know what came over him or what changed, but my best guess is that he finally grew a spine and stood up to his parents. Or maybe, just maybe, they gave up. One of my friends mentioned that he's moved out of the house he used to live in. So I'm leaning toward the first option. He did apologize a few days ago, again, and said he wanted to give me money as compensation. But I wasn't about to take a penny from him. I know some of you are probably thinking it was a foolish move, but I don't care. I meant it when I said I wanted nothing to do with him anymore. I forgave him, but that doesn't mean I owe him anything. I just wanted to move on, and honestly, I don't need his money. My parents and I are more than capable of raising my kids on our own. So, I texted him back and told him it was fine, but that I'd really appreciate it if he didn't contact me anymore. And so far, he's respected that. Right now, my focus is solely on my kids. I'm determined to give them the best life I can, and that's my only priority. I don't have time to be sad or angry at him anymore. I just want to be the best mother I can be, that's it.
And here's what I'll tell you at the very end. You watched this story to the end. It means only one thing. This video format suits you. You should subscribe to the channel to continue listening to similar stories in this format.